started, I'll call the meeting to order. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could, we'll start. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the
to the
republic
republic for which it
Which
stands,
stands
one nation,
one nation
under God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and
right,
justice
justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So the first item on the agenda is public speak. Do we have anybody who wants to add any public comments? See, we have Nick. He's probably just recording the meeting, but Nick, you're of course welcome, or Barbara, or anybody. Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to item number 3. Any additions or deletions to the agenda items? Okay. Hearing none, we can go on to item 4, which is the town administrator's report. So Eric, it's been about 3 months since we've actually met. So if you want to.
I know, Amanda, can I share my screen here? You got me disabled. Can you enable me to share?
go ahead now.
Okay. I think that's the right one. Share. Okay, is everybody looking at the administrator's report?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's out of the packet, Eric.
Okay, no, it's not out of the packet. What I realized is we put the wrong version of it in the packet.
Okay.
So this is a completely different than what's in the packet. So I'll just kind of go over it real quick. As most of you know, like a lot of towns, we've had ups and downs with COVID-19. So far, we haven't had a positive in like 12 weeks or something like that. It's been a long time. Our numbers as of today are 1 higher. And so I was like, shoot, we broke our record. And I called the Eastern Highlands Health District and they're like, no, it was an accounting error. They had one guy that should have been counted in the town. It's a 12-week-old case. So we're still at the same number that we've always been. It's just they've done their arithmetic a little differently. Most of you know the town's new website is up and running, thanks to Civic and Amanda and the website committee. It's been very well regarded and it's working awesome. If there's any financial stuff you want to put on there that you don't see on there now, please reach out to Amanda and she can make it happen. As a lot of you know, that Ed, the Director of Public Works, or correction, the road crew foreman, is still planning on retiring. He keeps waffling on when he's going to retire, but at least he's working on his paperwork for Social Security, administration and other things. So I think he's actually pretty serious about it. There is money in the budget to hire a 4th public works employee, but I was kind of waiting. I was hoping to wait to shake out the supervisor's position first. I have been employing Richard Bagan, who's been a seasonal help for a number of years here. And I've been basically running him full-time as the 4th person in public works, who's been working out really well. And I think he may very well end up being our 4th public works employee. Since the last time, we have gotten a bunch of information on the transfer station. The one piece we had kind of outstanding was what it was going to take to pave it. The initial estimates for paving came in pretty high. So I asked the Board of Selectmen for permission to use LoCIP money. For those of you who don't know, LoCIP is basically money that the state puts in a fund for towns. Each town gets a certain allocation based on the number of people that live in the town. And the money accumulates until you have a project that meets your criteria that you can spend it on. And in this case, we did spend the money, or we did apply to pave the transfer station with LoCIP funds. And we got, as of yesterday, we got capital authorization to spend that from the state. So we're good.
Okay. So it's the state that approves it, and that's designated really for capital improvements.
Yeah, it's right. It's basically a capital improvement fund. And there's all these different categories that are eligible for funding under that program. So, you know, in transfer stations and paving projects are both qualified entities. So what's going to happen is we ask for up to $65,000, even though I think we're going to spend a little less than 60. All that means is if we run a little bit over, we're still okay, and LoSiP will still pay for the whole thing. So that's in the works. They're supposed to start paving on Monday, or first grinding it all up, and then by the end of the week, it will be paved and complete. The transfer station project is essentially complete. There's some little things that we're still working on, but the vast majority, like we're finishing up the railing, we have to pave it. But the majority of that project is complete. One of the things we ran into a snag on with Public Works and the transfer station is, as many of you know, our brush pile at the transfer station has really mushroomed because we did not do anything with it last year. And I don't think we cut it the year before. So we basically have about 3 years worth of brush pile accumulated there. And I put out an RFP and we sent it out to, I had a list from other public works directors of all the companies in the state we knew that did it. So we sent it out to them directly and put it out on the state bid site and advertised it and did all that. Unfortunately, we only got one bid back and it was quite high. By high, I mean it was like $37,000, which is a lot more money than we want to pay. So we're kind of going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out if there's alternative methods of doing it, either renting, you know, a bucket grinder, ourselves in a, you know, an excavator with a grapple, or I don't know. I mean, we asked the fire department whether they would burn it, but they have declined because there's just, these days, there's too much paperwork with the state to kind of make that happen. I had also sent everybody a transportation infrastructure like summary. Jeff asked me to put it together, just kind of a current snapshot of like what we're spending this year and what we're up against, what are our total likely expenditures. And I think that's included in your packet. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer the questions on that. As you knew, we've submitted to the state, to the federal local bridge program for Bunker Hill Bridge. And I was able to get us into a specific program where the state manages the design, but also pays for all the costs associated with the design. So the first time we have to lay out any money is when we come to actual construction. So that's going well. They assigned it to Close Jensen and Miller, which worked out great for me because the project engineer is somebody I've known for many years. So that project is rolling. It's been accepted into the state program and the federal program. So they're doing the hydrology study right now, and they'll probably be doing test boring in the area in the next 3 or 4 months. One of the reasons I wanted to go for that particular program is because it takes about a year off the normal design build cycle to do that versus have the town manage the whole thing. Plus, frankly, it's a whole lot less hassle on my part and it's cheaper for the town. So that's...
Plus you get to hire a consulting herpetologist.
We have a consulting herpetologist. So one of the things you do is anytime you work anywhere with federal money or state money, you have to do a survey for something called the National Diversity Database. That's basically looking for everything endangered, threatened, unhappy. So surprising no one, that area is found to have a turtle population that is threatened. It happens, the Hop River, if you don't know, has one of the largest surviving populations of a particular turtle in New England. So it's not endangered, but it's threatened. So it's one category down from, so basically anytime you do anything near there, you have to have a consulting herpetologist. And it turns out there's been a bat species identified in that area. So they're not requiring us to have a bat guru. I don't know what you call a batologist, work for the project. But we do have some limitations on when we can cut things and stuff like that. So we'll have to work around both those things that are identified. Again, it's not any big deal. We expected, we knew we were going to have to deal with the herpetologist. We're very lucky in that Hank Gruner, who's a member of the Conservation Commission, is probably one of the leading herpetologists in the state of Connecticut. And so we just kind of plug them in whenever we have these projects. So that's not really a big deal. Times Farm Bridge. Those of you who don't know, we redid Times Farm Bridge starting in around 2000, finishing in around 2017, which is nuts in and of itself. We still have not closed out the project. I thought we had closed it out, or we were going to close it out about September. And then we kind of hit a snag with the state because the state wanted a material inspection form for one of the batches of rebar used in it. And they already had it, they just didn't know they had it. So that took about 6 months to go through the state system. And the bottom line is the bridge is done. The state has given us authorization to close it out. But the problem is that the company that surveyed it, or that was our bridge representative, CME Engineering, they disagree with the contractor on one particular change order from mid 2016. There's a difference of about $17,000. We have all the money to pay it, but the problem is that if we just pay it without the company agreeing to it, the state won't sign off on it, and the federal government won't reimburse us the 80% of the difference. So the bottom line is, from the town's perspective, this turns out to be about a $3,000 difference, whether the discrepancy is agreed to or not, because we're only on the hook for 20% of the cost of the discrepancy anyway. But it's really annoying that it's been holding up the project for quite some time. I'm semi-hopeful that in the next 3 to 4 months, we're actually going to close this thing out, but no guarantees. STEEP grant. So I submitted a STEEP grant several months ago, a month ago, something like that, for a paving project. We had originally planned on doing a STEEP grant for building the community center / senior center. But when they came out with, at the last minute, the governor came out with an allocation for a STEEP fund grant. Very short deadlines to submit it, number one. And number two, it was designed for shovel-ready projects with a maximum payout of $128,000. So it was going to be kind of useless for the senior center because we're not far enough along in design to be able to spend the money before we'd have to give it back. So I switched the allocation and submitted a paving project. I submitted to pave a section of Long Hill Road and a section of Shoddy Mill Road. And in both cases, we would grind the road up completely and repave, basically start over from the base. Because both of those roads don't have a good underlying base under the road, and neither of them have enough pavement that the inexpensive or the less expensive way to do it is grind off an inch or two and then just repave one course. But both of those roads don't really have that much pavement. In fact, in Long Hill, some of the sections of Long Hill don't even have 2 inches of pavement on it right now. So the only practical way we can do it and get a good long life road is to grind it up and do it again. If we get the steep grant, that'll pay for basically half the cost of it, which would be nice. Tree work, as you know, I asked last year for $100,000 for tree work. We ended up settling on $50,000. So I hired a company called Distinctive Tree Care. You might have seen them with the big grapple trucks running around. We hired them basically because their cost per tree removal is incredibly low compared to a bucket truck. You know, when I look back at what we've been spending around $800 a tree, which is actually not too bad. With Distinctive, we knocked that down to somewhere around, you know, $125 to $140 a tree, depending on exactly how you figure it. So it's a really good deal, you know, and we've just basically put them to work, cutting the trees down and grinding everything up. I did exceed the budget by about $7,000. Just because there were a couple sections that we hadn't gotten to that we really wanted to finish up just to complete a couple areas. So I basically paid for 2 more days and got them to throw in a bucket truck and some other stuff if I was willing to do that. So we can take that money either out of Town Aid Road, or if you agree to the appropriation transfer, I would like to add a little bit more money to that particular line item. And we can discuss that when we get to the actual appropriation transfer.
You're talking about pulling money from contingency?
Not talking about pulling it from contingency. I'm talking about doing the final closeout of last year's budget. And instead of just letting everything run to the unexpended fund balance, actually putting it in the permanent funds that we have.
Okay.
Just so we can utilize it. As you know, the town hall is open by appointment only, but we are fully staffed and fully running. Most of you probably know the assistant finance or the assistant treasurer, Maureen, resigned as of July. And we're sometime in October, we're going to be interviewing for applicants for that position. And that position will be for a assistant finance officer that's combined between the town and the school.
Not the assistant fiance officer.
All right. Spell check led me astray. Sorry, Mark. PEGPESHA, we applied for a small grant last year to allow us to broadcast or live stream meetings from PURA, the Public Utility Regulatory Agency. It's a grant called the PEGPESHA grant. We got the grant, we've spent all the money, and we've closed it out. That was about $16,000. So we have a pretty cool camera system. So when we go back to in-person meetings, we can film and live stream them and hopefully have decent audio quality and great video quality. We've had a number of employee grievances, a lot directly related to COVID-19 and making employees come back to work. We've settled them all. It hasn't cost the town any money as far as the grievance, but we have chewed up a fair bit of money in attorney's fees with our labor attorney. So we're still fine on our line item for the attorney's budget. But if we run into any more grievances or any more big stuff, we would be over. So I'm just kind of giving you a heads up on that. Oops, I think I wrote that twice. And we also are moving forward with adopting Edmunds for the financial software package for the town and the school. We have kind of an intro and kickoff meeting as of this coming Monday. And I know that, you know, there was some interest in knowing what CIP was up to. So I had sent, and CIP adopted, a new buildings and grounds capital plan. I haven't included that for you guys, but I certainly can if you're interested and you all want to see that too. It's not a radical update from the last, but we were required to have an updated plan before we could apply for LoCIP funds. That's one of the things. So they made a formal motion and formally adopted it, whereas before it was just my document. So that's out there. And then the last thing that I think I just want to, I've said to CIP, but I just want to give you guys the heads up too. Last year, we were talking about what to do about the replacement for our road sweeper. And I had originally hoped that we could farm that out and basically just sub that out every spring. But one of the things that's come up is since we've started chip sealing roads requires a lot of road sweeping, because you got to sweep before you chip seal, and then you chip seal, and then you go back 2 weeks later and you sweep it again, and then you go back 2 weeks later and you sweep it again, and then you have to sweep it again right before we put down the fog seal. So we're using a sweeper many more hours than we typically do in a year, and I think based on the road work we're likely to be doing, we're going to need to do that going forward. And the problem with that is that moves us from one big sweeping event in the spring where we just go out and spend a month and sweep, 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 to a big thing in the spring, but then, you know, in June and July, you know, using it a bunch more days, and then using it again in August, and then using it again in the fall, plus potentially storm. So I think we need to start going back and thinking about what we have to do to actually acquire another sweeper, because that one's 34 years old and the cost of maintenance is killing us. Whether we pursue a new one or a used one may depend a little bit on, you know, on input from Public Works, but we're going to have to do something regarding that. So that's pretty much what I have from administrator's report. Feel free to hammer me with your questions.
I got one real quick on the chip sealing. If chip sealing requires all that extra work with the road sweeping, does that change our calculus at all vis-a-vis how much cheaper chip sealing is than going with other approaches?
It does definitely factor into it. But if you took chip sealing versus paving is, you could ballpark it and say it's about 5 times the cost per mile for chip sealing. Better finish, better quality, but, you know, much, much more expensive. So, and the other thing to think about is, you know, we spent $150,000 on that chipper 34 years ago. So relatively speaking, or the sweeper, relatively speaking, sweepers are cheaper today in today's dollars than they were back then. They're still stupidly expensive, but if they really have effectively a 20-year lifespan, it's not a crazy cost per year, you know, as part of a roadwork, you know, plan.
Okay.
Yep. Eric, just to back up a little bit on the Edmunds financial software package, I know I haven't been able to make a lot of meetings, especially earlier in the summer, but I haven't heard anything much about where that went. I know Adrian asked for some clarification on some of the terms, but, you know, kind of where did that come up with? You know, the committee hasn't really, at least I haven't heard about any new meetings, or is this really going to the Board of Selectmen at this point, or what's?
So after the committee made their recommendation, it went before both the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
And both boards approved using the Edmunds package based on the the final version of the contract that we had. And we did go back and forth 3 or 4 times before we kind of agreed on terms of when things were due and what the costs were.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Part of what the town wanted to do is the town wanted to lock their like service agreement and yearly fees in.
Right.
For at
It
least,
wasn't clear, yeah.
right, so we knew at least for the next 3 years, we don't have to deal with any yearly price increases in what it is.
Okay. Any other questions for Eric? All right, thank you. Good update. It's been a crazy summer for you guys, I know, and obviously work's getting done, so it's a good thing. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, Treasurer's Report. Barbara? I think you're on mute, Barbara.
Okay. Unmuted? Am I on?
Yeah, you're on, and I'm gonna be back in like 2 seconds. I gotta figure out what all the commotion is in the building.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds like a party you weren't invited to, Eric, but yeah, you're good, Barbara. Go ahead.
All right. So the reports you have are for this year. They're always run current. So you've got a budget summary, revenue summary, TAR spending. We don't have anything for over expenditure. We'll be, kind of getting into that as the year goes on, I'm sure. So if you don't have any questions about revenue, expenses as they relate to year to date, which you probably don't, we're only a couple months in, I'll just comment a little bit about this year's audit. And the person who was on site last year, his name was Nick, he is back and he's spearheading the audit this year. So I'm dealing more with him than I am with Mike. And it's probably a good thing because they finally, kind of have some continuity there. They were having some staffing issues. So we've got some good communication continuity. Nick and I have been back and forth quite a bit with emails. He's requested some things that I've been able to provide, and I'll be able to provide more things as we go along, especially after this evening, after we talk about budget transfers. We'll be able to finish up our expenditure side of our ledger. I'm planning to, as soon as I can do the appropriation transfers from tonight, transmit all the reports he needs to kind of get underway. And in the interim, I am working on statements and schedules. That's kind of why I've been bobbing in and out here. I'm kind of multitasking, listening to Eric and also working on the audit report. So any questions about that, about the audit? We're probably going to be ahead of schedule this year, finally. So any questions you have?
Being ahead would be a good thing. And this isn't for you, it's more for Eric, I suppose, but do you see the Public Works overtime expenditures already at 100%? Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
but
surprising with that.
no, I mean, a lot of that was, we chewed up a lot of time with not snow removal, but dealing with the aftermath of the storm. So that was a big chunk of it. But even though we're already over with the overtime account, because we're not running a fourth full-time person right now, even though we're running them basically full-time, he's making a lot less money, and we're also not paying health benefits yet. So we have the money to absorb that through that, within that department.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be the usual shifting around. This is, I think, perhaps the first year we've actually pulled out OT for highway and tried to track it separate from snow removal IT, where in the past just a big amount of money has been allocated to snow removal and all OT has come out of there. Now we're trying to track road work OT separate from snow removal. So there'll be some, transferring around as the year goes on at the end of the year. So a little better accounting, a little better sense of how the money's being spent.
Yeah. I see we put our new tanker truck to pretty good use the other day.
Oh,
I don't think it was that good a use. The house still burnt down completely,
Well, it was
but
good timing, I guess. It might have been worse, right? Yeah. I mean, considering how dry things have been, it could have been a really, bigger issue.
I had friends texting me. That's not your house, is it?
Huh.
I guess it made the
Was
news.
it on the news? I just I
Yeah,
saw it
It
on.
must have been. I had friends from Simsbury texting me. Are you okay? Like, I woke up, hours had gone by. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Where was it?
it was on Gilead.
Gilead Road.
On Gilead.
That's why they were texting me, because I'm on Gilead.
Yeah. Oh,
Damned. I'll have to go
newer,
down.
newer big house. Just true from a picture I saw.
Oh, man. All right. I didn't know that. Okay.
It's too bad. I mean, the pictures just looked horrible.
Total loss.
Yeah.
You could
I
tell.
mean, apparently their smoke alarms must not have gone off because the homeowner said they woke up, hearing the snapping and popping. By the time you hear that, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
By
Wow.
the time the trooper got there, who was the first one there, you could see the whole garage was up, the room attaching the main house was up, and the house was on fire. So there was no saving it. It was gone by the time the fire department got there. So
Yeah. There was
Well,
something.
that's what insurance is for, kids.
Didn't cover everything though. All right.
No, I know. I'm the resident insurance guy, so I know.
All right.
Any questions on that section? Otherwise, we'll go on to the budget transfers, the appropriation transfers.
I have nothing.
Okay.
Anybody? No.
I'm good.
Okay, in your packet,
It's really small print.
Really small. Zoom it in. Here we go.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Control zoom. Okay.
yeah, so in your packet, you've got the appropriation transfers that were forwarded to the Board of Selectmen in July. They did not meet in August. So the second sheet is the appropriation transfers passed along to them in September. So just some comments. July, they were mostly small items, basically just the kind of the housekeeping items to shore up accounts. Shortages were mostly due to either items being under budgeted from the get-go or anticipated expenses being higher than budgeted. So they were mostly housekeeping. I don't know if you have any questions about those, but they're pretty straightforward. It's when we get to September, and the first few items are some large items because there was intentional overspending here. Eric had got approval to work on certain projects, and so the appropriation transfer approval came earlier, and they were things like the office, town hall, town-wide time clocks, which were installed, and that was part of the expense. Transfer station repair, which was dealt with earlier by Eric. That was that continuous project was over budget. So some of the money that is requested is to shore up that account. And then getting down to law enforcement, an unanticipated expense that Eric talked about was Eric, what is it? The road sign, the side of the road?
yeah, so what it is, it's basically an electronic speed sign that, we had been talking about it off and on for a year, and we knew we were going to have enough money overall in the law enforcement budget that we bought it knowing that the supplies budget was going to go over considerably. But
Yeah,
we were gonna be able
not a big deal because we paid the contractual fee for the resident state trooper, and there was a fairly substantial amount left in that budget, as there often is. So that was covered. So those were the kinds of things. They weren't in the budget, but Eric went ahead and got approval for them, and now we're just shoring them up in these transfers. The bottom part of this report, though, shows what I had talked about in an earlier meeting, that because of the COVID shutdown, we were going to be underspent in a lot of budgets. I mentioned specifically elections that all got canceled. So elections registrar was going to have a lot of money left. Senior transportation, another example of something that was going to have a lot of money left. So Eric's plan was to take as much money as we could find in all of these budgets and move them into funds that would then be transferred out of the general fund into specific funds. So the money doesn't flow into fund balance, it goes into permanent funds. And that's what you see in this spreadsheet. And one of them was the road improvement fund that had been an expense in the 2020 fiscal year, but a fund was set up as part of the budget process to be a permanent fund. So we could peel off some of that excess money and put it into that fund. Another one was the, on the notes.
Equipment.
The equipment fund, that was an existing fund. We have a DPW equipment fund. So Eric wanted to peel off about 50,000 for that, and tree removal was a new fund established. So all of that money you see, 125,000, transferring out of the general fund into permanent funds, not going into fund balance. And just as an aside, after those transfers are made, the residual expense that's going to go to fund balance, I'm estimating to be about 52,000. So kind of the first year, you're going to keep your flow into fund balance a little bit controlled. The only thing we can't control for is on the revenue side, where there's about right now 165,000 excess, and that's way before accounting for tax collections, because I haven't done any of the accounting audit work on that. But the education cost sharing was over by about 134,000. And so that goes to fund balance, nothing you can do about it. So you're still going to have a positive flow to fund balance, but mitigated by the transfers done to permanent funds. And by next month, I'm working on, as I said, I've been bobbing in and out here, working on statements, multitasking. Going to try to, by next month, have some preliminary revenue expense schedules to pass along. So you get kind of a sense of definitely going to be a positive fund balance, but get a sense of ballpark. So any questions about that? Yes.
I do. Just so I make sure I heard you right. So the proposal here is to take about $125,000 of money we didn't spend because of COVID,
Correct.
and put it into various capital funds and whatnot.
Correct, exactly.
Correct.
And if we do that, we still have 50 some odd thousand that's going to flow into
about-
unassigned fund balance.
Yeah,
Plus the excess revenue.
I'm not
right.
even talking about,
Flow in
right,
like
plus-
2.25.
plus the school money, plus the whatever,
Well, you
right,
know what? The school money's not going to be much.
right. And we may need it for whatever.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking, so in a sense, what we really have here is about $175,000 of money with when we have to make a decision what to do with, and you guys are proposing to take 125 of that.
Yeah, because I haven't shored up the tax stuff at all. I still have to do that now that the year is closed out.
Okay. Just so I'm clear on what we're doing. All
Right, and the reason we came up with those three is because I looked at two things. I looked at what did we short the most last year when we swapped to the kind of
Oh, yeah.
COVID budget, and said, what can we backfill? And I also looked as we start going through the season, you know, essentially the construction season, where are we the shortest? And, you know, the two places where the shortest is really road improvement money, tree removal money. And I'm kind of anticipating we're going to end up back having to fund a, what do you call it? Fund the sweeper. And basically what I'm saying is we're going to have to put off the second roadside mower, the smaller roadside mower, and swap and say the next priority is really going to be the sweeper. And now we'll have enough money that we're not trying to knock off the whole nut next year. We have a good chunk of it already set aside, and it's more likely to pass. So that's kind of where I was going with what the fund transfers were and my priorities for them.
And one follow-up, the 7,000 you need for the overage on the tree work we've already done, that's not coming from this money, that's coming from last year's budget, yes?
So that would be coming from the capital So if we agree to make those transfers to the capital funds, the extra 7,000 will come out of the 25 we're adding for the tree removal budget. If
Okay.
not, we're gonna take it out of Town Aid Road. Because even though they held up completely the last year our Town Aid Road allotment, they gave us Town Aid Road right when they were supposed to in July this year, surprising everybody. So, you know, we're okay in that regard. And I'm spending over, you know, on road projects just because I have the Town Aid Road allotment also to kind of deal with.
Okay.
And just looking at some of these overages, you know, some are obviously COVID related, such as the elections for the salary for the elections. You know, we're just over budgeted on the contract for law enforcement. That just kind of is what it is, right? So we have the budget guessing what it's going to be, and most of these look like they're just just kind of over budgeting, not having a lot of certainty about what the costs are going to be. So we've got excess. All right.
I do see Board of Finance legal on there. We're just not going to anticipate using that, I guess, because that's our total allotment, isn't it?
No, so we're not taking money, we're not transferring in money from the current budget. We're still transferring money in from the last year's budget.
Okay, we didn't use it. Okay, I'm sorry, my fault. Okay, got it.
Too late to spend. I had commented to Eric, in my observation, I've only, you know, been here a couple of years and been through the budget cycle, you know, 3 years. But a lot of individual departments will submit their budgets kind of based on their previous year without kind of like, well, what are my actual anticipated needs? And sometimes some of that money never gets spent. And if you go back, you know, 1, 2, 3 years, you'll see some things they'll put in that really just kind of, they put them in, you know, kind of by convention without really, you know, like, do I need this? And maybe I will need it. And that philosophy is almost like building a little contingency into every little department.
Yeah. That's why we did the 3-year rolling average thing, to try and make sense of that. Because if we're not using it, I mean, granted, you have some departments where it'll spike because things happen.
Sometimes not always a good idea. Well, I haven't used this for 2 years, but I'm going to put it in case I need it. But building contingencies into little individual department budgets often leaves you with that residual.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Barbara. I mean, a small amount is not a big deal, but when you end up in the several $1,000s, we have $125,000 worth of extra.
So
that's why we have a contingency fund, right? So.
Perfectly correct. That's exactly what it is. And so if, you know, going forward, that's just one thing that, you know, I would kind of just look at as Board of Selectmen. Well, I think Eric's going to be more on top of this also, because he's going to be reviewing overall department budgets. Probably, I don't know, Eric, if you plan, I think at one time the former first selectman, when he was more of a hands-on person, did actually look at budgets with the departments, you know, go over them. And
Right.
I mean, if you, and I'm sure, you know, you kind of have that in your mind also. You go through individual budgets with people and say, what is this for? You know, and they will let, you know, they'll come, because I will tell, you know, ask them, and they'll come out and say, well, I don't know. You know, I didn't use it this year, but I don't want to take it out. So I think it's
Right.
it gets a little
Yeah.
tighter. You won't have these big flows from expenditure into your fund balance, and then you're only dealing with the revenue side, which you can't do anything about. You know, the revenue is revenue. So, you know, except maybe, you know, try to budget that a little more tightly. But, you know, that one's a little, you know, state money is a little hard to fine tune sometimes. So that's just a philosophical approach to.
Yeah, I think
Sure.
we'd rather have them tighten those budgets up, and then if we need to go to contingency, we do. And if we decide that we need 75 in contingency instead of 50, but they have to come to us and talk to us and explain it, maybe that's better than
Yeah.
just having 2,000 here and 3,000 there built into the budget as cushion.
Yeah,
Sure.
Eric and I did, you know, as we went through the budgets, the big ones we knew, you know, we're going to have a lot of surplus, but we just went through, and anything like over, you know, 1,000 to 1,500, we just grabbed it. So let's, you know, move this money. It's not used. So, okay. So any questions for me?
But I would also say one of the things we have to keep in mind is that if you look at the municipal recommendations for what a contingency fund is for a town, you know, we're at basically we're at around 1% of the budget is contingency. And if you really right size all the budgets, 1% contingencies are pretty tough, you know.
Slow.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't disagree that there's a bunch of areas that we need to tune up and we need to get correct. You know, there's a bunch of groups that have mileage. It's like, well, did you use any mileage? No. Use any mileage last year? No. Well, you know, why are we holding mileage on the books if you're not going to claim mileage, you know?
Right. Well, that's my point about contingency. If we go with a much tighter budgeting approach on these items that don't get used consistently, then upping the contingency is also a perfectly rational response. That's totally
Right.
fine. And then you, at your discretion, you know, at a certain level, and if it's higher, it
Sure,
comes to us.
sure.
That makes sense to
And-
me, at least. I don't know. I mean, the rest of the board members can have their opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that approach. I guess what I'm saying is if we truly right-sized all the budgets, then having a 1% contingency number is pretty low.
Agreed.
You know, but, and the other thing I think we need to consider, and one of the issues with this, with all the little appropriation transfers, is we're kind of what I call micro budgeting. You know, we're budgeting down to the individual line item, you know, and doing a lot of transfers between budgets to shore up this budget because we went over in paper clips and, you know, we went under and, you know, something else. So maybe at some point we need to have a talk as a Board of Finance whether we want to start shrinking some of these categories as we readopt the new financial software. Because I mean, like Public Works has, I think, 52 or 53 different line items just in the main Public Works one. And it's just like, then you're constantly moving little bits of money. Well, we bought 2 tires, you know, so we're over our budget, and, you know, you move a little bit in from oil. We would be better off using the micro budgeting to come up with the number, but then, you know, having, you know, essentially having the threshold for when you need a transfer be at the department level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Eric, that's a really, really good point, because that would be a charter change. Instead of having your budget be line item, you would have your budget be department level.
Well, you can still have a line item budget, but not have a separate line item for hydraulic.
We can consolidate line
I
items
felt this way for
without,
a long time since,
No,
you know,
you would still have line items because you still want to do a budget, but you wouldn't worry about the pluses and minuses as long as your bottom line.
but I would think that even without a charter change, we could collapse some of the line items
collapse.
into larger categories. You
But-
know, overall equipment category
Mhm.
for tires, oil, we could talk about doing that, you know, so that we don't have line items that are $500.
right.
Exactly.
I hear that. That makes a certain amount. So that I don't know how many man hours we want to be spending, spinning our wheels, sending a few $100 this way
Well,
and that way.
See the three
That makes
pages,
a lot of sense to me.
yeah, 3 pages of transfer.
We might still budget it when
Right,
we have our spreadsheet to
right.
create the budget, but then when we actually put it into action,
Right.
consolidate.
Having the detail back there is fine, and having that as
Yeah.
detail to support a bottom-up budgeting process where you really know what's going into that
Yeah,
$8,000 instead of having, eight $1,000 accounts. You have an $8,000 maintenance account or whatever it is.
mhm.
Without, you can still provide the backup for what's actually going into that
Right.
spend.
But if,
Without having this,
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
yeah,
to.
without having to do this transfer work.
Transfer.
I agree with that.
And same thing, if you just had a blanket, department level instead of, line by line account level, people could work within their budget because that is the way it rolls up into the financials. It's just a bottom, Department of Public Works, town clerk, tax collector. That's the only reason they want to see the transfers done is because that's what our charter says we do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if the bottom line department isn't overspent, it's not an issue.
Okay.
So a couple of ways to approach it, both in how it's budgeted, which we will be looking at as we go to this new software, how we want to set that up and what kind of line items we want to have. But, something just for future reference. You don't need to micromanage the line items.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, anything more on this? I mean, I think that my personal feeling is that moving the funds or moving the monies to the capital, to those funds makes sense. I mean, it's a reasonable thing. We all knew we were under budgeted on all of those things. Equipment, the sweepers, something new, but
I mean, I'm in agreement as well. We made our budget real tight for reasons that were completely understandable at the time. If we've kind of lucked into a little money that didn't get spent because there's, an actual upside to COVID in some way, we all know, and Eric's report, if you dig into it, has a lot of detail on this. We are years out from conquering our road situation, our tree situation, all this stuff.
Right.
And if we're aiming at avoiding a situation where we get to a fiscal year where we have to whack the town with a significant tax increase, the best thing I think we can do is to roll this money over.
yeah, mitigate that. Yeah.
Right.
We have to smooth this out. We're looking at like a 5-10 year plan here to get on top of this stuff. So that's my take. I understand if somebody else comes back and says, well, gosh, we're over, we have this extra budget money, give it back to the taxpayer or whatever. I disagree with that, but it's at least a valid, it's a valid standpoint. But no, just based on what we know is coming and all the things we have to do, I'm in agreement. We should move that money over.
Yeah, likewise, I agree. Any additional comments there?
I'm just gonna say,
Diane, anybody?
No, I'm basically in agreement with everyone.
What were you saying, Dave?
I was saying I agree with that. We hammered the budget so much because of COVID. So, I mean, that's my justification for rolling it over.
Yeah. It
If
certainly
we'd
would
gone with an aggressive budget, it would be a different discussion, I think. But we went with a very different approach. So
bump the taxes, something like that. We really didn't do that.
yeah, if we were getting a revenue shortfall, again, we'd be having a different scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
We probably just need a motion to approve the appropriation transfers.
All right, I will move that we approve the suggested appropriation transfers as laid out in our packet. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so Rob moves, Diane second. Any discussion? Further discussion? Okay, we can go ahead and take a vote. I'll go around the horn. Linda, you're at the top of my screen.
That looked like an aye, but
You're
you're
on
muted.
mute, Linda, so I raised your hand. Give me a thumbs up if it's a yes.
Yeah,
Yes?
That's a yes.
that's a yes.
Okay,
You're muted, Linda.
And I can't,
there you go.
There you go.
oh, yes.
Okay,
Yay,
good. Better to have it as clear in the public.
technology.
I think Amanda muted me, so I couldn't do anything.
Oh, it's her fault.
Oh,
I
sure.
see.
Blame Amanda.
Okay, Rob?
Aye.
Okay, Diane?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
I also vote aye. That passes unanimously. All right, thank you. Okay, any other discussion or anything else from you, Barbara?
No, that's all I have. And thank you very much. I'll get these posted and then get the information on to the auditor.
Okay,
Thanks, Barbara.
thank you. All right, so we'll move on to item number 7, which is old business. The agenda has a couple of items, the governor's executive order and the town budget. Eric, anything new on the governor's orders that you want to bring to the fore?
No, I mean, we're still operating. I was unclear whether we would still be under executive orders by this point, but that appears to have gotten extended. So the governor's orders still are in effect. I know we had talked about whether we wanted to come back to meeting in person or not. It is allowed to meet in person at this point. The meetings can't exceed 25 people. So, but most of our meetings are well under that. And the meeting room at the town hall can accommodate like 17 people, 18 people, and still meet the 6-foot distance threshold. We are still technically required to wear masks in a public meeting in a public building. So if you choose as a board that you want to start meeting in public, you have that option. I'll support you either way. I'll either be there in person or be there on Zoom. So it's whatever you want to do. Probably you're not going to get so many visitors that were above the threshold, the meeting capacity for the room.
We almost never do. Unless it's an actual budget meeting, we don't get that kind of attendance.
Right.
Just speaking for myself, I'm not thrilled about indoor stuff. I'm all about going outdoors and doing things, but when you're inside and, I don't like wearing a mask any more than anybody does. And the Zoom thing seems to be working. So I'm fine with this format for the time being. If we get public comment that says, we'd really like you guys to show up at the town hall, I'll reconsider. But for now, I'm good with this.
Yeah, I'm in the same position as Rob.
Okay, so I guess we'll continue to schedule them via Zoom until such
Yeah.
time as you as a board tell us not to do that anymore.
I would agree with that. I mean, I don't see any compelling reason to do it in person. Originally when we started looking at this, it seemed like there were some barriers and how would the technology work and would people get used to it? And it's cumbersome when you have to do things like take a vote, which we learned at the budget meeting. But for routine meetings, I see no compelling reason. I think Rob made a good comment, though. If we did have public input that indicated that, people were having this challenges of this particular technology or method, that we may have to reconsider, but, that's, apart from that, I just don't see any compelling reason to start meeting in person. I agree. I think it's our duty really to do things in a manner that's professional and does the best we can to protect the citizens and ourselves. So.
Sure. And the other thing I would say is that our overall feedback we've gotten from Zoom meetings is that more people like the Zoom meetings and the fact that they're recorded and they can watch them later.
Yeah.
I got the feedback I got in the Board of Selectmen meeting is it's not so bad to watch it if you watch it later and you watch it over like 3 days, so I think that system, I think long term, maybe we really ought to consider, do we ever want to give up Zoom? I mean, there's some real advantages to this. I think by the time we get back, we will have the community room set up so we can film and live stream and do a decent job of publicly doing the meetings in public and broadcasting so people can still get them from home. I would like to still figure out how there could be a live component so people could still participate in public speak. But I haven't really figured out how that could work yet.
You'd have to have people up on a monitor, I would think. I don't know if we have the technology set up for that right now, but you'd have to have people could call into a Zoom meeting. We'd have it set up in a corner or what have you on a fairly large flat screen, or at the very least, something that gives us audio, right?
Right. And that's kind of where we're going with the meeting room. We're putting in basically a 75-inch flat screen TV on the sidewall with the sound bar, so we'll have decent audio also.
I'm jealous.
I know that was the PEG-PESHA grant. All your utility, all the money you pay for electricity, that funds Pura, that's what it gets spent on. Flat screen TVs for the community room.
You sure it's
solar panels are doing for me.
I'm sure it's going elsewhere too. That's just for that, so. Okay. Any other comment on holding the meetings virtually through Zoom? Okay, good. Anything else related to the governor's orders? It looks like things are just moving along and no real changes there. So.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, 7B is the fiscal year 2020-2021 town budget. We just kind of went through some of that with the appropriation transfers and the funds. Eric or Barbara, do you have any more input on that?
I do not.
No, I think we're okay. I want to sit down, in another week or so when we're done with the first quarter and really start looking hard at the budget and, where we are. But I think generally speaking, we're in pretty good shape right now. I don't see anything that's to me really obvious that we're worried about.
Okay. Any other comment on that old business? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 8, which is new business. We've got 3 things to discuss today. One is item 8A, which is the Board of Education request for unexpended funds in the school improvement account. In your packet, you've got the letter that we received from the school district from Sally Doyen. She notes in there that there was a motion at the Board of Education meeting to request the Board of Finance place unexpected funds at amount not to exceed 2% of the 2019-2020 budget as allowed by law. I'll edit that part, which is equivalent to $81,300 be placed in the school improvement non-lapsing account.
And Foran, yep.
Yeah, made by Mr. Foran. So that's the extent of the letter. They'd like us to obviously notify them of our action on this. if you remember last year, we had declined this because we really didn't get any particular rationale from them, even though we'd asked for it, how we do it. And I guess I'll just say that my personal belief is that this is a odd and unusual and certainly unique year for not just the town, but especially for the schools. This is a very, very trying time for them trying to figure this all out. So my inclination would be to allow that, permit that additional funding as opposed to just letting it roll into the town's accounts. Anyone else want to make a comment on that?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I saw that this evening, when I was scrolling through the packet, I called the business manager and I said, you know, on my side, I only see about 11,000 left in your budget. And she said, since then, it's even less.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when that letter went out, it was kind of a maximum amount that they thought they'd be turning back.
Right, right.
They've encumbered a lot, including encumbering the cost of the software conversion. So she said, in fact, we have to reconcile our numbers because I said, I see about 11,000. She says she sees about $80 or something. So she said that was pretty much off the table. She thought maybe a Board of Education member was going to be kind of tuned in or let you know, but she said, yeah, kind of strike that. There really isn't money to turn back.
Barbara,
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
yeah, I heard
Dave.
from a member on the Board of Ed that it is a very low dollar amount.
Yeah,
Now, the letter says not to exceed.
yeah,
So if we approved it and it's $80, it's still $80. We're not approving $81,000 of money that's not there.
exactly. But
Correct.
but the business manager was sort of the opinion like it's kind of a moot point because they went ahead and just encumbered and they don't anticipate it being approved.
I think part of it was they're doing the same thing the town did in some senses, as they preloaded this budget's expenses on last year's budget because they could.
Yeah.
Knowing that this was going to be a sketchy year. So they basically took the surplus that they had from last year and kind of prepaid down a ton of supplies and a ton of other things that they knew they were likely to be because, you know, there's so much uncertainty in their budget.
So just procedurally, I mean, I understand it may be moot and that there may be basically no money here. It's still before us. I guess my take here is that if we approve it, there's no real harm done if they're in fact out of money, because it's a dead letter then. I mean, if they've used it, they've used it. We're not giving them extra money.
The
Right.
only thing about approving it is it generates an accounting journal entry, you know, like, and we've closed the year. So if they don't really anticipate it, the only thing about approving it is that we'd have to just kind of fine tune that $80 and actually do a, you know, kind of a journal entry and a transfer into that fund. So.
Oh, I see your point.
There's just a little more work, but there
All
is
right, I guess
value.
I'm now kind of
Yeah,
agnostic on
everyone's in
this.
kind of a hurry to close the year.
It's
Yeah.
not necessarily an automatic process that's going to happen there.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have two choices. One is we make a motion to place those unexpected funds and unexpended funds in the non-lapsing account in any amount up to and including 2%, or we just take no action and thereby nothing really occurs there. So that's either way is fine.
We just sort of punt and see where it shakes out, and then next meeting, close the loop on it, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the business manager in the conversation we had tonight was basically, it's not going to go anywhere. You know, they're okay with.
Okay. I mean,
My-
if that's true, then yeah, I mean, I guess I'm okay with punting.
My comment on punting, I have no problem with that either, as long as someone could maybe explain why we did it from an accounting point of view, so they don't feel like we're against them. I don't want someone to perceive it that, we're doing because we don't, agree with them or we don't trust them. That's all. That's my only concern.
And, that's a fair point, Dave. Maybe what we can do is I can write a letter and just explain that it's our understanding that there isn't any material funds left for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And that, therefore we decline to take action. If that's not the case for some reason, or the situation changes, to let us know, and we'll certainly reconsider, because we want to support the district.
Yeah. If that's done, I'm definitely in favor of it.
That seems like a reasonable response, given, just our understanding based on the most recent information is X, let us know.
Right, yeah, if it's not the case for some reason, then, yeah, please advise and we'll take action.
I got someone in my household on the board of ed, so I'll make sure they know too.
Okay, thanks,
Excellent.
Dave. All right. Any further discussion, or anybody want to make a motion on that, or we just move on to the next agenda item?
Do we need a motion to take no action? I don't think we do we?
No, we don't do that. Yeah, it's
No,
not
so we're fine.
generally a good idea, so. Okay, so we'll move with item 8B, which is the hiring committee for the assistant finance officer.
So just so that you know, we had a bunch of back and forth between us and the ed because this is a shared position. So in the end, what we agreed to was that we would have 2 members representing the town, 2 members representing the Board of Education, and 1 kind of neutral outside person. I lined up the finance director from Columbia, Beverly Curley. Don't ask me to pronounce her last name. I'm terrible with that. And I'd feel bad about butchering it. She has agreed to be on that committee and probably on the committee that would ultimately pick a new finance director. I thought she would be a good choice because she's been the finance director of multiple towns, and she's a finance director of a combined Board of Education and town office. In other words, they are now where we want to be. So the Board of Education has identified 2 people. The Board of Selectmen has basically said myself and either Adrian Mandeville, if he's available. And if he's not, they asked whether you, Diane, would be willing to be the rep from the Board of Finance. And Adrian's on, he's the one that made the motion. So I don't know whether we talked to you at the time or not about that, but that's what it was.
I did not. I did not get a chance to talk to Diane about it. Depending upon when the meetings are, will depend on whether I can do it or not. I didn't know if it was possible for you to kind of sub in if I can't. I think it's going to depend on what that group's schedule looks like.
I mean, I can certainly sub in if Adrian can't make it because I'm retired now, so I have time on my hands. So
You're a very busy retired person, so I didn't want
I
to.
know I have a lot of things going on, but I'm still retired.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Apologize for the delay in getting on. I just unfortunately got home late tonight. So.
No
You
problem.
missed everything, Adrian. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, wasn't the plan,
the world ended while you were away.
Wait till you see the minutes.
right?
The guy who's not there gets assigned all the duties. Right? So.
Yeah.
So Eric, is there any action that we need to take on this, or is this just generally okay? Then
No, that's just
if
general.
Diane agrees to cover, I mean, then we're good. Okay.
No, Eric,
Yeah.
the board of ed picked theirs, so are we? So we probably need to get something together to kind of get that moving at this point, right?
Yeah, I'm working on it. Unfortunately, both Laura's on vacation, who's one of the Board of Ed's pick, and Beverly they're actually a little farther along in their audit process. So she's got some time blocked out where they're meeting with their auditor to close out this year's books. So,
Okay.
but we should be able to figure out a time, certainly in the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, where we can get together and start doing interviews. And we have a pool of applicants already.
Oh, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Did we get anyone with a background that looks acceptable? That's always the concern, right?
Honestly, I haven't even looked through them yet. It's kind of moot until we have a committee and we're a little farther along. So,
Okay.
and we basically left it open and said we're going to leave the position open until filled. So
Okay.
hopefully we get a few more. And if anybody knows somebody who wants a finance job in the town, let us know. We'd be more than happy to consider it.
If you could send out a doodle poll for schedules, maybe that's a good start.
Yeah, right now I'm just trying to get gross stuff like what weeks work with everybody. But yeah, it's my intention to do that in the next couple of days.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I apologize. I came out on the tail end of it. The request for unexpended funds for Board of Ed. So did they end up burning through? Because at one point they did have some unexpended funds. Did they end up
Yeah,
burning
it sounds like they're down to almost nothing, and they just basically it's a moot point.
Okay. Yeah, because I know at one point they had, something like 80 grand or something left over. So
Yeah. Well,
Did
so
they end up-
Barbara was saying, she said she checked and it was at 11 at some point, and Laura told you it's down to almost nothing now, right?
Yeah, I called Laura this evening, Adrian, because I have on my side about 11,000, and she said we need to, kind of shore up our numbers because she's down to less than that.
so were they pulling funds for COVID prep? Is that or something? Is that?
I don't know. The only thing she mentioned was encumbering the whole cost of the software conversion.
Which I thought we budgeted most of that on the town side.
It was actually what ended up happening was we expected a much larger number. So I think we kind of put in like 30-ish and they put in like 30-ish, right? And
okay.
so, but now we're looking at, I think our first year initial is something closer to like 37 or 38.
Yeah.
So we're over. So
Yeah. They encumbered, we budgeted. So, somehow we'll figure it out.
okay, we'll sort it out then. Maybe we should talk to them and see. I mean, I think both sides are experiencing issues. We're dealing with some, major tree work, which was kind of expected but unexpected. So I think both sides are kind of getting hit. So
Yeah. Well, you saw the appropriation transfers, right, Adrian?
I did.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something major there because I didn't realize they had spent that much down. So thank you.
Yeah, I didn't realize it. Okay, well, I guess we can go on then to the next piece of new business, which is 8C, the Transportation Infrastructure Overview. That's in your packet. It's fairly readable. I don't know if you want to just hit the highlights, Eric, and explain where we are.
Tell me how in depth you want me to go. I mean, we can get into the weeds or I can give you the really big picture.
Big picture.
Big picture, I would say, yeah. I mean, we can all read.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the big picture is the final summary on the last page. And it just breaks out paving and road work, bridges, culverts, tree and canopy work, guardrails, and then drainage. And just my best guess, what we budgeted this year, what our total current backlog is, and what a 5-year and 15-year expenditure would be, and then some notes on the specifics.
Okay, and the current budget, you have a current budget and adjusted budget. The adjusted budget includes the additional amounts we talked about with the transfers earlier. So,
Yeah, and it also adds in the fact that I was not, because they were an entire year late with Town Aid Road last year, I was not anticipating the state would actually put in Town Aid Road when they were supposed to this year. So since they put it in, we're gonna spend the money that we're owed, but we weren't necessarily counting on. So that's really, and the other thing, where the big discrepancy is in paving and road work, part of that $600,000 difference is if we get the steep grant, that effectively adds $128,000 to our road work budget. So it gives us a big boost if we get it.
okay.
So
Now,
that's-
At the $600,000 difference, you're talking about the $200,000 difference to a $600,000 figure.
right, yeah, sorry, I misspoke. Does anybody have specific questions on any of those items?
what did you end up clarifying the steep grant?
Say that again?
The steep grant, like what exactly did we end up clarifying it as our request?
We requested money to grind up or reclaim and repave the section of Long Hill Road between Route 6 and just past the intersection of Bear Swamp.
Okay.
And then Shoddy Mill Road between Route 6 and just past the intersection of Wales.
Okay. Okay. And what's the time frame to get an answer on that? Do we know?
We were supposed to know September 14th. But obviously, actually Martin Heft sent out a note saying basically, well, since we extended the grant deadline by 2 weeks because of the big snowstorm, we're probably going to extend the deadline. We don't know exactly what it is. I would anticipate within the next 2 weeks we'll know.
Okay.
But and yeah, those are the big ones. Like I said, we're cranking away on the design work for Bunker Hill Bridge. That's going to be the big one in terms of the bridge. You know, there's some variability in the costs because we're still, it's not even designed yet. So we have basically not to exceed numbers, but we're assuming that it'll end up being less than the not to exceed numbers. And the culvert numbers are kind of variable. I based them basically on the bids that came back for similarly sized culverts in the town of Lebanon, because I discussed that info with a town engineer because they've done a ton of culvert replacements. They started a 20-year culvert replacement plan, about 15 years ago. So they're basically through their culvert replacement schedule and we're just kind of starting. So that's that. Tree canopy, to put it in perspective, when we surveyed the tree canopy last year for dead trees on town roads, we had identified about 130 to 140 dead trees on the town road. Obviously, a lot of them were still dying, so they appeared to be alive last year. When we redid that this year, our initial count was like 480. And then, and that's a drive-by survey. And then when we started getting to the point where we were running a cutter up the road and looking at everything on foot individually, that number climbed pretty considerably. So I would say, the number currently stands, in the 800 to 1,000 dead trees. Before we did the cutting, of which we've probably identified and cut about half of our total problem, but we're also ignoring the ash that's still alive, but not looking healthy. So we're going to have hundreds more dead trees in the next year that we're basically ignoring now because it's still alive, and we're trying to take the deadest stuff that we have to go the fastest. And we're also ignoring some of the really hard to get to trees that we will have to address sometime, but are going to cost much more per tree than what we've done so far. And in truth, we're also at some point going to have to go back and start doing canopy work, which is actually opening up the roads and getting a lot of the overhanging branches over our roads that we should have been doing over all along. But, you know, we haven't, I don't think, done a major canopy trim in town since, you know, sometime in the early 90s. So that's become problematic too.
Given the infrastructure work that we know we need to address at some point, and given that we're also talking about a community center, is there anything, whether it's through CCM or through our bank, that we can talk or set up some type of online seminar, something to maybe bring the Board of Finance up to speed on financing options, like how bonding would affect us, those types of things, so that the Board of Finance, prior to going into the budget next year, you know, instead of dumping all of that on them at once, is it possible to maybe do some of that, say, before the end of the year this year? Like, you know, maybe November, December, or maybe beginning of January, before they start having to deal with budget. Maybe January, try to put something together so that, just to get the Board of Finance up to speed so that they can make some educated decisions.
I can certainly start looking into it.
Okay.
I know.
The CCM has those various seminars and stuff. It wouldn't be a bad one for them to host. And
Even if we start, we're going to be working with that joint finance director, you know, for this interview process. Maybe we can start picking her brain to see what Columbia has done, or Andy Tierney. You know, they just did a bond package.
Sure. Yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind as I'd reach out to Andy, because I know he and Ram and I think Marlboro all used the same agent.
Okay.
For doing their bond packages.
And maybe,
I know Andy at least was pretty happy with them.
And maybe even the agent could do something to say, you know, this is how it affects you. These are the terms that you could consider. Just kind of walk us through the variables so that as we get into budget next year, we can kind of look at what our long-term looks like. You know? I mean, I'm not at this point proposing that that's where we go. We also talked about loaning ourselves the money out of our accounts, you know, kind of paying ourselves back depending upon what the numbers really look like and what the Board of Finance decides. But I think we need to have everybody educated before we try to make those decisions. So, including myself.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I don't want to sound, you know, like doom and gloom. I'm just trying to put it out and say, look, this is basically what we're facing with. You know, this is kind of the bite we're going to have to take year by year to start addressing these. And here are the greatest priorities.
I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I can speak for myself when I say that I'm extremely happy with the level of work that you've been able to accomplish this year with the budget you were given. I mean, I think residents are genuinely seeing an impact of their dollars. So I think that's huge. So many people have commented just on the transfer station, never mind the tree work. So, you know, and the roads. So we're going in the right direction.
I've definitely seen the tree work. The ash thing is frustrating. It's just unlucky. Basically, we're dealing with it. We have to deal with it. I had an ash tree in my backyard I had to have taken down years ago. It cost me a ton because it was on the other side of my fence line. Couldn't get a truck to it, which is kind of what you're talking about, Eric, with the trees that are hard to get to. You pay so much more per tree if you can't get a truck at it.
But I have to tell you, Eric was able to work with distinctive, and our cost per tree is
He gave us that. Yeah, it was great. No question.
Wow, what a difference. So
Yeah.
we're in the right direction.
Yeah, and we did work really hard at that, honestly. We burned an amazing amount of, my time and Eddie's time being incredibly selective and setting everything up. So these guys had nothing in their way and could just go, which has been, very effective. So yeah, I was really pleased with that.
And they're happy with the relationship as well, I would assume. So
Yeah. And they're relatively easy to work with. So
good.
So that's been good.
I think, all options on the table. I think, that's a good point. We should look at how it makes sense to tackle this over the next 5-10 years. And if bonding makes sense, fine. I have this knee-jerk reaction against it, but if that's the way we need to go, it's the way we need to go. We should find out what that entails.
Well, I think my impetus for wanting to kind of look down this path is, from having come from your board and now being on the Board of Selectmen, the thing that I've seen over the past 6 years is that every time we get close, whether it's COVID or the state budget issues or whatever, all of a sudden we get a massive hit from RAM. There's always something that derails the town side. And I think that we need to start being proactive and saying the town needs to put itself first a little bit on some of these things. And if we can know that we've encompassed all the majors and can, go to the citizens and say that we have a fixed number that we can expect over the next X number of years, with the exception of a, act of God or a flood, this is what our budget looks like and this is what our infrastructure repair looks like. I think that will help. I don't know that the town would approve it. I don't know that you guys would approve it, but I don't want us to get into budget season and start having this conversation and then you guys are overwhelmed with the amount of conversation that ends up happening. So it'd be better to try to do it before you guys have to make these decisions. So.
Yeah, the time to start planning our approach is now. I mean, we know it's going to be a, 5, 10, 15 year.
Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's part of what I'm trying to say is there are no quick fixes here.
No. And I think we're all kind of finally acknowledging it. So at least, I am. And I think our board is, so.
Okay. All right. Good. It's a good point, Adrian. A good suggestion. I think we need to start thinking about it.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for infrastructure? Any questions for Eric relative to that? Okay, hearing none, I guess we'll move on to item 9 on our agenda, which is the approval of the meeting minutes. We don't have them in front of us, or it's not part of the packet, but they're on the town website. Does anybody have any motion relative to the approval of the June 24th, 2020 regular meeting minutes? Anybody want a motion to approve? Is everybody on mute?
Not anymore.
You check. Not for me.
I'll be honest, I didn't have a chance to look at them. So
Yeah.
I'll trust you guys, but
I read them.
probably
I'll
gonna
make a
abstain.
motion to approve them.
there you go.
I'll second.
Linda makes the motion to approve the meeting minutes from Wednesday, June 24th, the regular meeting. Dave seconded. Can we have a vote? Linda?
Aye, yes.
Okay. Rob?
I'll abstain because I didn't have a chance.
Diane?
I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't even at that meeting, so.
Dave?
Aye.
I'll also vote aye and passes unanimously, or not unanimously, but passes 3 ayes and 2 abstentions. Okay, thank you guys. Moving on to agenda item number 10, which is our liaison reports. We already talked briefly about the software committee that's basically in the hands of the selectmen and the Board of Education at this point. So I don't know if there's going to be much further action on that committee.
We're just waiting for, Eric, did you ever get that final contract to sign?
Yes, signed, sealed, returned. So, yep.
Okay.
So we are moving forward on it. The software we ended up picking was Edmunds.
Right.
We renegotiated terms based on everyone's input. And they were amenable to all of those things. So we're going in the right direction. So.
Yeah. Okay, good. So plans in place and moving forward. So basically it's done. Good. There was also some input. Linda's on the, I'm sorry, not Linda. Louise is on the Capital Improvements Planning Committee. And she made she said, where's her email?
About the sweeper?
Yeah, she just put out a point about Eric had discussed the option of sharing with another town, the new or used sweeper, and she agreed with that. So she just wanted to kind of put in her thought that it made sense to sharing with another town. Hebron was suggested at one point, but she thought maybe a town that was a little smaller and similar to Andover. That way, it's just kind of a more equitable sharing arrangement. So that she just wanted to kind of make that point. We're not obviously taking any action on that today, so I just wanted to just note that she had that input.
I think if we go to a sharing arrangement, we would want to do, if we go with a bigger town, then it'll be a percentage based on miles of roads or something to that,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if we've got 30 and they have 90, then,
yeah.
we pay 25%, they pay 75 or something, but.
Yeah, there's probably some pretty good ways to measure that and make it equitable, but you'd have to make sure that was in the agreement.
I know this is an outlier, but given our still limited staff position, our staffing down there, is there any municipal companies that come out and will sweep roads?
So there are, and I actually addressed this earlier, but basically that was where I was going at the beginning of this year.
Okay.
But what's kind of changed my mind is the fact that we're chip sealing a lot. And so we're not just running the sweeper and doing a big run in the spring. We're doing a big run in the spring, and then we're sweeping all the roads just before chip sealing. We're sweeping them 2 to 3 times after chip sealing. And then we just swept them again before we fog sealed. So we've spent a lot more hours on the sweeper than we have in years past. And that seems like if we're going to continue with the roadwork plan that we need to be on, that's probably going to continue. So I'm not sure it's practical because I think we'd have to bring them back too many times.
Can we milk hours through simply for that one maintenance task and then farm out the rest?
Maybe. I mean, the concern is that the yearly maintenance involved in that machine. I don't know.
Is it possible to rent a machine?
I looked last year in the littler machines, yes, but that type of machine, I haven't really seen, like the local rental companies don't seem to have it. I don't know. We would have to look a little further. I mean, I would also say that one of the things we ought to strongly consider is buying a used machine, because a lot of the municipalities that use them for sweeping up garbage put an enormous number of hours on them in a relatively short number of years, and they tend to sell them relatively inexpensively. So we may be able to pick one up that has a lot of hours on, but doesn't have years and years of rust and salt.
Is this the type of thing that we should look at trying to come up with a budget number to put aside to to purchase a used machine, to put it aside into a fund? And then when start looking at that point?
Well, that's part of what the Public Works Equipment Fund is. And we are gonna add the 50,000 to that. So
that
I do
enough
think
for a
that
used
gives us
machine?
some options. If
Oh.
we really found a machine we wanted to buy, you know, a used machine, we could probably pop right now with the money we have in that account. But I feel like I would need to do a lot more research, and, you know, I would need somebody. I don't know exactly how to approach that. I know Eddie and I have talked about it a few times. You know, we need to put a lot more mental energy into selecting a unit than we have so far, certainly. But we know, I mean, the one major thing we know we want is we want one of the ones with the high dump, not the low dump like the one we have. Because the one we have, I mean, ideally you want to go park one of the big trucks somewhere, sweep till it's full, back up to the truck, dump it in the truck and keep going. And the unit we have dumps out the bottom. So you basically back up, make a pile, then you got to take the loader, come back with the loader, scoop it up with the loader, then put it in the truck and then drive it away. So it just takes more operations. So we've kind of refined what we want, but you know, we would have to look very carefully at used ones before we were willing to come back with any kind of proposal, certainly.
What about looking at a unit that's self-driven? That you has a dump back? If they're rear dump units, you know, like an Elgin or something like that.
What do you mean self-driven?
It's a driving unit, so it's basically a vehicle instead of a sweeper vehicle. It's an actual, like, it could be a Mitsubishi body or somebody like that, and then it has a complete sweeper unit built on that frame.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like most of those, like the Elgins and stuff, aren't like, the one we have was an actual purpose-built sweeper. Everything was built. Most of them seem to be built on some kind of truck frame.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Yeah. No, I think we would end up with something like that.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, you know, those are probably 25 to 50 depending upon the hours. So yeah, you know, a used unit. So okay.
All right, any other discussion or input from liaison committees?
No, the only thing I had from selectmen was, you know, wanted to talk to you guys about trying to get some depth on, you know, whether the board would be open to, you know, trying to do some type of training or, you know, seminar work on financing options. And, you know, other than that, Eric's got the bulk of it. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I guess we can go ahead and move on to item 11 on our agenda, which is the board open discussion. Any open discussion, any topics, anybody have any concerns, want to bring anything else before the board? Going once, going twice. Still have time to unmute yourself. Okay, hearing none, I guess we'll go on to item 12, which is our public speak. Do we have any other public speak? Okay, hearing none. Item 13 on the agenda is adjournment. We have a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Okay, Rob's motion to adjourn. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Diana seconded. All in favor, Linda?
Aye.
Okay, Rob?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
I also move to adjourn. Passions unanimously. Okay, that's it, folks. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Everybody take care and stay safe until next month.
Good night.
Mark.
Bye, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.
All